Hello, hello, and welcome to the fourth episode of the Semrush Social Chat. So it's October. We had to go with the spooky theme. Halloween's just a few days away, and so I have some amazing panelists with me who are going to share their very spooky and horror stories that have happened on social media. Things anywhere from bad PR mistakes to just dreadful posts happening on a brand's social media. So today I have with me Melissa, Eric, and Jen, all amazing social media superstars who are ready to share their info. But first, let's get to know you guys. Melissa, would you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, I'm Melissa Fash. I'm the PubCon social and community manager. I'm also the US blog editor at Semrush. I've had a lot of social media experience. I worked on the Moz community team for 2.5 years, managing social media in the morning while they were asleep. East Coast time, I managed it. And I worked for SEJ and Authority Labs doing social media. So I've seen a lot of fails.
And a lot of good things too, I'm sure.
Yes.
Awesome. And Eric?
Hey everyone, so my name is Eric Stafford. We run a small creative and conversion agency helping our audiences, our clients connect with their audiences.
Awesome, thank you. And thanks for being with us today, Eric. And Jen?
Hi, everybody. I am Jen Herman. It's Jen with 2 N's. I always have to specify that because people get confused and want to make sure you find the right me. So Jen with 2 N's. I am the world's forefront blogger on Instagram marketing, and I do consulting and strategic services for a variety of clients from small businesses all the way up to medium and even some large size businesses.
Awesome. So then you're able to see everything that's happening, whether the mom and pop shop is doing it or the big corporate business is making a mistake.
Yes.
Cool. All right. Well, let's get started. First question, probably the most important question I'm going to ask you guys. It's really, really detailed, very, very specific. So brace yourself. What are y'all going to be for Halloween? Anyone have any awesome costumes?
I'm going to be going, so I have a day job on top of Jen's Trends. So a group of us are actually going with the carnival theme, kind of like Think Greatest Showman. So I am the ringmaster. So I've got a fabulous jacket, the top hat. I got to, of course, have fabulous heels to go along with it. But yeah, so I'm going to be the ringmaster.
That's awesome. And a tiger.
That's very cool. Melissa, any costumes? Nothing?
I have no plans yet. I'm still resting from PubCon, so I'll figure it out.
Okay, you have a weekend.
Yeah.
All right, first, okay, since we'll get into the actual social media related questions. First off,
Wait,
Eric,
Ash, I want to know what your costume is going to be.
Oh,
my costume, oh shoot. So I actually haven't thought of one yet, but the backup easiest one is always the cat, because you can just put some ear things on and just wear all black and throw some eyeliner, whiskers on, and you're good to go. So if you see photos of me as a cat this year, that means I was very unprepared and actually come up with the costume.
Gotcha. Yes. There's a couple things that prohibit me from planning costumes and having a lot of options. One of them is we live in South Florida. It's really hot here. So the less clothing normally, the better. And the beard sort of limits me. I don't think I could pull off the cat.
No. Yeah, that'd be a little difficult. Maybe superhero?
He could be a Maine Coon with the...
I like that. I'm thinking Tom Hanks from Castaway. I've got the beard, just wear some beat up clothing, and maybe I can pull that off.
Just carry a volleyball around with you and it'll be perfect.
There you go, Jen. That's what I was thinking.
Perfect. All right, well, Eric, while we're on you, getting to the actual horror stories of what happens on social media for businesses, for some of your clients that you see, what do you think is the worst between being retweeted a tweet that has a major spelling error or being misunderstood for something that you or the brand wrote, like your tweet being taken totally out of context or a spelling error? What do you think is worse for a brand?
You know, it really depends. I think that depending on the brand, maybe there should be spelling errors, right? It really comes down to who you are and what you're trying to say. I guess I would think that the biggest mistake I see people make the most on social media or horror story is when their messaging is one-dimensional and it's all about, hey, look at me, hey, buy my stuff. I mean, that really, truly, in my mind, is a horror story. We all scroll past those people. We all unfriend and unfollow those people because it's obnoxious. It's called social media for a reason, and there needs to be engagement. There needs to be communication. There needs to be dialogue for that to happen. And so I know that that might not be the specific answer you wanted, but I can't give you any other answer. I believe that very strongly.
When do you think, since you had mentioned that in some cases it would be okay for a business to have a spelling error, what kind of businesses would you say those would be?
Well, it depends on the audience that I think you're trying to speak to, right? There's a YouTube channel called DUI Steve, and he's drunk all the time and he rides a lawnmower around. And he's built an incredible social media following, and he's, for lack of a better word, he's a good old boy. He's a redneck. And there are misspellings in his posts, and yet you would expect them to be there. It feels very on brand, right?
So if it's in terms of making it authentic, then it's okay.
Yeah, I think, I wouldn't be shocked to see misspellings or maybe, curse words in Howard Stern's posts, right?
Sure.
So I think it really just sort of depends on, and conversely, using big words, right? Like using really, really big advanced language. If your audience is not at that level, it's not really going to do you any good. If it's not true to who you really are, it's not going to really serve you.
I was going to say, like, to that, to kind of the opposite point where, like, let's say you're, Merriam-Webster and your, brand is being a dictionary, then having a spelling mistake, kind of a big deal.
Yeah, that's a problem.
Right? Like that's something that's going to be, pretty well pronounced and probably called out explicitly across social media if they have a spelling mistake. So I kind of agree to Eric's point. I think the spelling mistake is really dependent. I'm a personal brand. I'm an individual human being. And while I like to think I understand grammar and punctuation and the English language better than it seems the general population at times, that doesn't mean I'm not at fault of putting the wrong, there in a post or something like that. So we all make mistakes. And I think that's okay when it's not something that's prolific. It's something that does show that we're kind of that human side of us, that we are prone to making the occasional mistake. And that's okay. But if it's pronounced and happening repeatedly and constantly and not in an intentional way, like the example that Eric gave, then I think that shows lack of professionalism and disrespect and a lot of other things that would tie into people not wanting to work with that brand. If they're constantly making those mistakes, but on the rare occasion, I don't think spelling is a big issue. I think the context would be a way bigger issue, and making sure that, how many times someone went to say one thing, but it was taken a completely different way, and the PR backlash is exhaustive. So I think in general, that would be more catalytic.
Yeah, it's kind of like when Carrie Fisher died and Cinnabon did they had their buns on the side of her head, and it's like, we get where you are going, but you're selling yourself. So
yeah.
You just killed the dedication.
Yeah.
But as far as spelling, like to Jen's point, I'm in Florida, so anything can happen in Florida, but there's a local news station and they had so many misspellings and typos for like a month that I actually called the news station. Like, you're the news. You can't be doing this.
No, I did the same thing. There's a local station here in San Diego and I was losing my mind because every post had a spelling mistake, and it was this is like a major market. I'm in San Diego. This isn't some little tiny town where, a 14-year-old is managing their social media. It is a major network, and every post had a spelling mistake. I did the same thing. I called them out on it. Like, personally, I reached out to them on the back end.
Yeah. And I found out they'd hired like someone's daughter to run social media, which I am totally opposed to. With all my decks, I do not believe in hiring someone who isn't qualified and doesn't have a PR background or
Amen.
Preach.
You've got to have someone that's managing your content, that knows how to deal with people, that has the right temperament. And
a lot of times now that's the front lines, right? I mean,
yes.
A lot of times that's the first touch that people have with a business or a brand is on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook. And so giving it to, Todd the intern, Ashley, if we can.
Let's bring back Todd.
You know, I couldn't agree more with what you said, Jen, and I think that applies visually as well, right? Like, I mean, if you are a business that does car detailing, then your images need to be beautiful. They need to be sparkly. And you know, it's funny. I see a lot of people who do coaching and offer the opportunity for people to find this laptop lifestyle and this freedom in their life, and they're sitting in a dark room in front of a monitor, and it's like, dude, you better be on a beach, right? If you want me to believe that. And so I think there's a visual and a vocal tone that really has to be carefully applied when you're speaking to brands.
That's such a good point. I'm so glad you brought up the imagery, because whether it's the image or the video, it has to match the tone, and it all goes back to authenticity. Yeah. So moving on to the next question, Melissa, you've worked with so many different brands. What do you think the scariest, and by scary I mean terrible, thing that you've witnessed happen to a brand on social media? And you don't have to say which brand, but what have you witnessed and how did you handle it?
Well, okay, are you saying things that I managed or things that I saw? Because there's a big difference.
Let's do managed first and then saw.
Okay. Well, I always have the same example for managed, and that was when, now granted, I'm East Coast time. Moz is 3 hours behind me. We had a DDoS attack at Moz, and all the tools went down, and all of the site went down, and nobody could get anything, and no one was awake. So luckily, Moz had prepared manuals for all of us with all the phone numbers of every single person and every single developer. So I was able to get online, get that PDF, and call people and wake them up in Seattle and be like, oh my God, help me. But until we could figure out what was going on, I had thousands of angry people just screaming at me on social media. I needed this post so I could use this example in my job today. So I showed them how to find the cache on Google. And then, you know, we didn't know what was going on. So when we finally figured out we were being attacked and we were being blackmailed, they wanted to be paid before they'd let the site, you know. We finally were just told them the truth. This is what's going on. And the audience immediately calmed down and then supported us. It was a massive shift. It was the not knowing and not having access. But we didn't want to lie to them and say why the site was down. So that was the most traumatic thing I've ever been through myself. It lasted about 3 hours. Someone did a case study on it, which I was really impressed at just how we handled it. But I will give Moz credit in that they had everything prepared for me. So should the worst happen, I knew exactly what to do and who to contact. But as far as observing brands, during the Aurora school shooting, I saw a brand use the hashtag to sell their Aurora dress.
Oh, that's right. I saw that too.
That was a nightmare. Bic pens. I sent this one to you, Ashley, on Women's Day. They released a photo. You can Google it. It says hashtag Happy Women's Day. And it said, look like a girl, act like a lady, think like a man, and work like a boss. And women didn't respond very well to that at all. But IHOP.
Wow.
I know. And that goes back to the hiring. Who thought this was a great idea? You know, IHOP.
You know what? Not just the hiring, Melissa, but the training, right? We work with a lot of companies who don't really have tone documents. They don't have standards manuals for how the brand needs to be portrayed and what the driving emotions are that they want to communicate, their mission and their core values. And when you don't train people properly, no matter how talented they are, they're going to have trouble speaking to the brand. Right?
Yeah, and when I talk to people and I've done workshops, I tell them, you come up with 5 or 6 to 7 hard questions to ask a person when you're interviewing. And if they get frustrated and irritated with you and they can't handle that, they're not going to handle 1,000 people yelling at them on social media. So it's a lot about who you hire, how you train, what your goals are, what you want on your team, and those core values are like number one.
But there has to, like, in those situations too, like, it always surprises me how many big brands have these situations. Like, I think it was last year, not this past September, but last year, September 11th, and T-Mobile did this whole campaign, and like, because the whole 9/11 thing, but it was all to sell phones. It was kind of like the Cinnabon example you gave, like, and it just completely fell on deaf ears, and the outreach was just crazy, or the pushback was just crazy in terms of what people just couldn't understand why they would go this direction. And I'm always surprised at big brands that have at least multiple people managing those teams, and they have management and approvals and CMOs, and that these things actually move through the chain of people approving them to then get posted. Like, okay, if you're a small mom and pop shop and you hired an intern, or you hired your cousin, or you do it yourself, and maybe you kind of lose the context, there can be a little bit of forgiveness because you're kind of maybe doing it on your own. But when you have a large brand, national, international level brands that are making these mistakes with multiple people, like the Big Pen example, like how on earth does that get through legal and marketing and management to be approved to say, yeah, we're going to put that out on any day, let alone Women's Day? Like, that shocks me, I think, more than others, is how do those things get pushed through and actually get signed off on?
But see, I think, I don't know if you knew this, but right after that campaign, they did the pins for women, and they were pink.
The pink pens, yeah, I remember those too.
Even Ellen DeGeneres took it on her show and got mad. Yeah. So I do think, based on what you said, I do feel that a lot of big brands still don't respect the people that run social media. They don't understand how important the job is. They just think it's this thing over here. And I think that's a big failure on large brands, is they just think we'll hire someone cheap to run it and that's it.
Yeah.
And you can't. The bigger the brand, the more money you should spend and the more you should value that employee. I've seen really great employees that not get appreciated, that run social media like a dream. Whoever runs Wendy's, God bless them.
Right?
All the time. Whoever runs Charmin, Webtionary, I mean,
I would add Progressive Insurance in there. There are some very savvy social media brands that they just do it right. And like you said, Melissa, it's because they're putting the time, the effort, the energy into it, right?
Right.
Yep. That's really what it comes down to. Eric, have you ever been in a situation where the CEO or a client demands that you absolutely have to post something, but if you post it, it's probably not going to either represent the brand well or be responded to well, but they're forcing, like you have to post this. Have you ever been in a situation like that?
I haven't really. The way our agency works is we tend to lay out, a content matrix, and we tend to lay out a social media posting strategy. We do a lot of work with standards manuals and media libraries to make sure that people have templates for messaging, whether it's, verbal or visual. We don't actually do a lot of day-to-day or week-to-week management of social media accounts for clients. However, I will say that, we've worked with a couple of clients who ignore our recommendations and don't get the results that they want.
I'm sure that happens all the time. What about you, Jen? Have you ever been in a similar situation?
Not specifically, because I don't do any client management myself. I don't actually, I consult, I try to give people the best advice I possibly can. But that being said, I've been lucky in the more recent years to have clients that really know me and understand what they're going to get when they pick up the phone and talk to me. But I had clients early on that were very adamant of that style, where they're like, well, this is what we want to achieve and this is how we want to achieve it. And you need to tell us how to get there as fast as possible. And I was like, I am not the girl that's going to work with you, because that's not the game I play. And I'm not going to, like you said, kind of encourage those things that they're pushing the sales 24/7, and they just want to yell and scream about how awesome they are, or their new product launch is coming out and the only thing they want to talk about is this new product launch. And I'm like, that's not how it works. Like, you can't do that. It needs to be this entire robust strategy of engagement and social community development. And if they don't want to work with me and understand that, then I don't want to work with them. So I've had that luxury to be able to kind of, stay away from those specific situations. But I've had, clients that have come to me after they've had bad employees that did those sorts of things, or they've worked with agencies or even ad agencies that have done those types of content for them. And they kind of come to me and they're like, we realize now this was all done wrong. How do we repair it? And really looking at how to build that community and foster that community and try to, repair that damaged brand, because they've been looked at a certain way and they may have this huge audience, but they have no engagement, no reach, no exposure because they just were doing it wrong for so long. And, trying to overcome those challenges and get them back to understanding social and re-engaging that audience. And that can take 3 to 6 months. I mean, that's not something that just happens overnight. And that's, I don't think a lot of people understand that social media can be very forgiving, but it takes time. You can't just show up and be like, oh, we did something wrong. That's fine. Tomorrow the internet will forget about it. Like, no, they don't. They're going to remember it for a long time. And with algorithms and everything on social media, even just the people getting over it is one thing, but the actual technical side of overcoming algorithms and overcoming all the things that you've created in this content backlog are all things that take time to overcome as well.
Overcoming the algorithms. So glad that you mentioned that, because we forget that. With social, it is the human element. It's not SEO. We're not bot focus or user focus. We're focused on how people are going to like or engage with me. But if they're liking and engaging on something that's so incredibly negative, the algorithm's going to keep popping that up. We can't hide that, and we can't stop that.
Hey, Jen, I have a question for you. Have you fired a client who refused to implement your audit or your strategies? Or
no, I've never had to fire anyone. I had one client that I took on a few years back that we kind of had a bit of a disagreement in the way of like, okay, I gave them the strategy and I said, here's how you're going to do it. And they literally didn't implement it. And they came back to me 3 months later and they said, nothing's working. And I was like, yeah, you didn't do anything I told you to do. Like, you didn't implement anything. So I was like, no, I didn't necessarily fire them, but I definitely didn't continue to work with them because we weren't under contract or anything else. But I was like, look, I mean, I can't help you. If you're not going to do the work, I can't help you. And we severed that relationship.
Yeah.
I've done that as well. More so what Ashley was asking is I do like independent consulting and corporate training, and I'll go in and then I'll come back every 3 months and we'll look at the plan. And I had them want to put women in little bikinis on the boats. And I was like, no.
Are they a beer?
No. It was for a family brand. Anyway,
of course it was.
If you do this, I can't work with you because I don't want my name, and they said, well, this is the way we're going. And I walked. And
it was the dress like a woman, drink like a man campaign.
Okay.
Right?
but sometimes you have to do what's best for you, and if the client is going to frustrate you and stress you out, it's better to just walk.
Absolutely. Yeah, as a messaging and conversion agency, our entire promise is built on metrics. Mm-hmm. And if a client doesn't implement the strategies that we recommend, or if they don't execute on what we tell them to do, or allow our team to do that, they're not going to get the results, and we can't ethically bill them. I don't feel right doing it. And so like you had said, Jen, I wouldn't say that we've fired clients, but we've certainly let clients know that we have reached the end of what we're able to achieve with them simply because they're not executing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What about the content that we engage with as a brand when we're representing a brand? Jen, is there anything that you think we should avoid engaging with on social when you're representing a brand's profile? So if you're on a brand profile and they go and like a competitor post, or should we avoid doing things like that?
And again, it's so hard to like give a black and white answer to like all of these things, because really it's always going to come down to individual circumstances and brands and what's happening. Like, there could be situations where it would actually be beneficial to go and like competitors' content and show support for somebody else in the industry. It could be something like during, a Women's Day type thing where you could go and support other businesses that are augmenting women in the workforce. And so that's actually a supportive way of reaching out to your competition, even though in a normal circumstance, you're not going to want to be over there liking and commenting on, your competition. but there are circumstances where it could actually work. I think in general, it really does have to come back to your brand voice, tone, and style and your message overall. And if somebody is aligned with your brand, then it's okay to support that. Even you look at something like Chick-fil-A, which is a hugely Christian organization, and that's part of their brand identity. So for them to associate in any sort of, religious, whether it's posts or brands or that sort of thing, isn't a bad thing because it actually aligns with them, even though a lot of times you'd be like, stay away from religion and don't touch it. But for them, it kind of relates. So you don't have to run away from it. Even politics, it's like, Nike had their big campaign with Kaepernick, right? The whole believe in something, even if it sacrifices everything. And that was all this hoopla and it was all political and everything else. But guess what? A few weeks later, their brand or their stock prices were up like 30-something% or whatever. So
and a lot of brands liked their stuff as a support.
Mm-hmm. So I really don't think you can say that you can never like certain topics or engage with certain content. I think it really has to come down to your brand, whether or not something aligns with your brand messaging, and if it's relevant to that time and place. Like in a completely different context, maybe competitors would never support Nike. Adidas isn't going to go over here like, high-fiving Nike. They're the direct competitor. But in that circumstance, a lot of brands rallied behind them. So there really isn't a black and white answer to that one.
Yeah, I think Nike touched on a very timely and very relevant discussion that was happening outside of their brand, but one that directly impacts their brand and speaks to sort of the rebel, rogue, underdog nature of what they do and who they speak to. That sort of just do it vibe. It's not out of character for them to speak to that campaign or have Colin Kaepernick as a brand ambassador, right? And I think really that's what it comes down to for me. If you are Fox News, clearly you will post about politics, right? If you are the NAACP, you will speak about issues like that, right? But in general, if that's not something that's tied clearly and strongly to your brand, our advice is almost always don't post about it. Don't post about race, religion, sex, politics. You're just asking for trolls. You're asking for trouble, unless it's a brand driver for you, right? And you're obligated to post about it.
I think there's like a size impact on that too. Like as a small business, maybe in your community, there's more political motivation, right? Like, so you could go that direction, even though normally you'd be like, no, steer clear. Because I agree with Eric. A lot of times you want to steer clear of those things. But, bigger brands sometimes get a little bit more flexibility and leniency with that. But then you also have big brands who are like, nope, we're not touching that with a 10-foot pole. Yeah. But I think the smaller companies, those small to mid-sized businesses, it is generally best to avoid those topics unless, to Eric's point, there's some direct tie-in, whether it's your community, your local environment, something that's current in the, the news and trends and that sort of thing.
Now, there's one thing that we haven't really touched on that maybe Jen and Eric, when I work with businesses, I tell them, if you're going to have your employees label themselves that they work for you on social media, you need to have some rules about what they're going to talk about, what you're okay with them talking about. And a lot of businesses are like, we can't tell them what they can talk about. And I'm like, yes, you can if they're representing you as an individual. I have seen brands avoid getting in trouble, but their employees representing them say horrendous things, which then therefore hurts the brand. So I don't know, Jen, do you agree that there needs to be some kind of protocol?
I do. This falls into like a legal issue where I'm in California and you can't tell anybody to do anything. And from an HR perspective, it's really hard to give those guidelines. But yes, to your point, if they are online representing your company, meaning if I get hired by a major company and they say, look, you work for us, you're going to tell everybody you work for us, then obviously anything I say is a direct reflection on that brand, regardless of whether it's my personal opinion or not. We've even seen people do this by accident where you manage your company's Twitter account and you're accidentally logged into that account instead of your own when you go and tweet something. We've literally all done it. We've seen horrible examples of it play out in the news. So I think there does have to be some sort of policy if possible, otherwise a very well-structured guideline that gives people some directive. And we do that at the company that I work for. I've set up policies and social media guidance for employees coming on and saying, look, if you're posting on LinkedIn that you work in our company, you realize that anything you post is in some way a direct reflection of our company. And we just ask that you be very consciously aware of that. Your personal Facebook is your personal Facebook. Do what you got to do. But the more things that are public, especially things like the Twitters and the LinkedIns where they aren't locked down in privacy, you do need to be very consciously aware of the fact that you are representing that brand. And the same that goes for like, people in the organization at any level. Like if you're out at a party and you represent a company and you all get completely drunk and destroy a restaurant, that reflects negatively on the brand, just as if you went out on social media and essentially wrecked a restaurant publicly. So it really does have to be something across the spectrum. I agree that there should be that guidance of how you present yourself online is a reflection of that company.
What about in terms, I see a lot of times on Twitter, in Twitter profiles, that they'll be associated with company X. And then right underneath, they'll say, tweets are my own, or tweets are mine. Is that enough?
No. I think understandably, they're trying to say, like, yes, I work for this company, but my opinions are my own. And even companies will put disclaimers, right? They'll be like, the opinions expressed here are the opinions of the company and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of all of our employees and blah, 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 blah. Like, you see that all the time. And yes, as individuals, we're all entitled to our opinions. But if you're going to go on Twitter and just be a blatant troll and harass people and call people out and be this horrible person, and yet you work for a company that prides itself on inclusion and empowerment and all these, very uplifting type situations, that's a huge misaligned representation. You can't separate one from the other, because how can a company like that hire a person who's having these behaviors? And that reflects on both the company and the employee.
Jen, I have to ask you. So, a company does their due diligence, HR hires someone, and then that person turns out to be a troll. When that comes public, whether it turns into a PR disaster or not, does that employee need to get fired immediately?
Again, being in California, probably not, but it starts the motion of termination, right? It's at least like a write-up. It's at least some sort of, some sort of counseling, something that kind of addresses the issue, things that are documented in their employee profiles, and then you can kind of move forward. But it is, unfortunately, depending on where you live and what state you're in or what country you're in, that could be immediate, terms for termination. But certain states are not going to be quite as easy to do that. But it could be, okay, you're not terminated, but you ain't doing that job anymore. We're going to go stick you over here in another department where you can't touch our front-facing social media.
Yeah, it's a bad look for a company for sure.
Yeah.
Once the media gets involved, they've hurt the brand, which then becomes a firing offense, I believe. But that's what happens. The media picks up on it. You'll end up on the news. We've seen it happen how many times? And then I think it is a fireable offense.
Well, we've seen people, and again, different states, some different laws, but I remember there was something a while ago, I want to say it was maybe a couple of years ago, and there was a guy who was caught on camera kicking his dog in an elevator. Mm-hmm. And it went viral, and everyone was like, oh my God, why is this dog being abused? Like, it was for no apparent reason. The guy was just kicking his dog in the elevator.
Let me guess, the guy worked for Otis Elevator Company.
No, he didn't work for an elevator company, but he was terminated the next day when his company found out. And even though there was no relation, they were like, this does not represent the type of company that we are, even though it had nothing to do with that type of, like that. It wasn't like an elevator company or anything related, but that was a poor reflection of him as an employee of the company. And they terminated him the next day. No questions asked. He was gone.
And I think companies just need to have in their hiring contract, this is, you're not abiding by our core values or whatever, you're out. I mean, it happens all the time. So.
Kick your dog in the privacy of your own home.
Or not at all.
Or not at all, yeah.
Right. Or not at all.
Yeah, that one works too. Melissa, when a brand starts to get negative feedback, whether it's because of an employee or because of something that they posted, especially when they start to get negative feedback right away, which usually is going to happen instant if it's going to happen. What's a piece of advice that you can help give businesses to mediate the situation, businesses and social media managers?
I think the biggest mistakes we see are people being reactive. And I always say, take a step back, calm down, look at it from all sides, think about it for a minute, talk to your staff. I think if you're an individual social media person, you don't have a team, you need to have somebody in the company you can say, okay, now how else do I need to look at this before you reply? And you always need to be, you have to be as polite as you can possibly be. I mean, like I used to have in my workshop presentations, Comcast responses and how CNN picked it up and how bad they handled it. You will end up on the news easily, or in presentations or in webinars if you handle things wrong. So everyone, what I tell everybody is you are being watched 24/7 on social media, and you can delete, but people can screenshot faster than you can delete. So you have to watch what you say. And now I will say that I've had at Moz situations where I did my due diligence. I replied. I tried to be as helpful as I could. I did it 8 or 9 times, and the person kept coming. And eventually, I always try and direct them offline. Let's get on the phone with you. Let's talk about it, whatever. Some people aren't going to stop no matter what you do. And then once you've shown the public that you've done the best that you can, it's fine to just step away. If they want to keep acting like a fool, they'll keep acting like a fool, and that won't reflect badly on you. It'll make them look like, well, that brand really tried, and they wouldn't work with the brand.
Yeah, so I think that it really is to that point, like not engaging the trolls, and whether it's like a disgruntled, unhappy, like actual employee or just a troll, or however it starts to manifest into this negative PR situation, you want to address it. Excuse me. You want to take that on head on, be, like I said, polite and upfront, but get it offline. Do the, we are so sorry that you had this experience. We want to make it better. Please send us a direct message and with your email or your phone number, and we will contact you directly. That's your way of saying we're here, we're listening, but don't do it in this automated corporate speak of, we're really sorry that you had this experience. Like, address the actual experience, address their concerns. Most of the time, if you do that and you come out and actually say, we're so sorry you had that specific experience and that's not something that we live up to and we, want to look into it more, a lot of times they're going to be like, it was fine. I was just fired up that night. And the next day, they don't really think it's that big of a deal. And they're going to move on without any more issue. If they're trolls and they want to keep at it and they're not going to let it go, you just kind of have to walk away at that point. You can't keep engaging them.
And one thing to Jen's point that I always have in my presentations is if you ask them to go offline and talk to you, you do it right then.
Yes.
You don't take their phone number and wait an hour, because then they'll be like, they never called. So if you want to squish it, call. And then to your other point about someone having a bad day, I had a guy yell at me once and was awful to me. And I tried to work with him, and then the next day he messaged me personally and said, I just found out I have a brain tumor and I freaked out on you. I'm so sorry. And I was like, thank God I didn't know, but we don't know what kind of day these people are having. I admit that I have yelled at Comcast in a rage as a customer badly. I feel bad. I need Wi-Fi. I work from home,
I'm pretty sure customers being angry at Comcast is part of their brand at this point.
Right? That's part of their contractual agreement. You will hate us. It's okay.
Right.
It's their job to take my rage and stay calm about it. And so that's what I would say. Just stay calm, because you don't know what kind of day the people are having, and they'll calm down, like Jen said, later.
And I think, like, in addition to that, one of the things that I work with both at my day job and with some of my clients is I tell them to have a face of the company. Mm-hmm. And that may not be the person managing the social media. So if something happens and it starts to become that PR nightmare, you need that person who can go on camera and be authentic. That may not be the CEO. That may not be the person managing social media. It may be somebody in accounting or in human resources. It may be an admin level employee, not an executive level employee. It needs to be someone who can go on camera, who can be in person, who can be authentic, who can speak the voice of the company, and who can handle those tough questions. Because not that everyone who has a troll on social media is going to be treated as if they're in a press conference, but really that's what it can start to feel like. And if you can't handle that barrage of attack and questions and harassment that's about to come your way, it's going to hurt you even more. So you need somebody who can stand up there as the essentially face of the company. And even if it's just to say, we're looking into that, we don't have the answer for that right now. You need someone who can say that clearly and with authoritative, confidence, not, well, we don't know. Like, you need that person who's going to represent your company in those types of situations.
Yep.
And it's really important to note something that both you, Jen, and Melissa were kind of echoing back and forth is this is not just for big corporate businesses. This is small businesses as well. This is medium-sized as well. If you think that there haven't been screenshots that have gone around of the local pizza shop that tweeted out something that they should never have said, it's all over the place. It doesn't matter if you're Comcast or you're the Pizza Hut down the street trying to represent.
And to that point, I want to give this example, and I wish I had the name of the bakery, but there was a bakery, a small company, and they do like these cakes that look like rock formations. Like they look like amethyst, and they have these crystals and these beautiful cake formations. And they had one that ended up looking like female genitalia. And it got crazy. Like in terms of it went full blown viral with the comments that showed up on their page. This little tiny bakery in some little, town was hundreds of thousands of views and comments, but they handled it so well. They embraced the joke. They embraced the comedy that came along with it. So rather than rushing backwards and being, super reactive, as Melissa was saying, they embraced it. They were like, okay, you know what? They were like, look, apparently our customers have really sick minds, but we're cool with that. We'll make more of these cakes for you guys. Like it just kind of rolled with it. And I think there you have to, again, kind of, assess the situation, but there's ways that you can take something that could have been a really bad PR situation and turn it into something hugely positive. And I use them in examples in webinars and, seminars and things like that of how to do customer service right when it could have gone wrong.
And the difference between, sorry, Eric, the difference between a big brand and a small business is you screw up on social media as a small business and you might not have one tomorrow. And
true.
You have got to be careful because you don't have attorneys and funds and money to fix it.
Well, what you're both saying speaks to, let's step back here and have a meeting, which is kind of, what you had said, Melissa. And I think that's probably the biggest takeaway that folks can take away from this talk tonight is the more quickly you are reactive and the more you start talking and trying to address it without really getting straight on what your game plan is, you just sort of sound like you're rambling and you don't know what you're doing. You sound like you both had said, Jen, as well, you sound like you don't have any conviction. And you'll see people respond with, 14 tweets to a crisis. And the smarter move is always to step back, assess your options, consider the different things that you may be able to address and how you might want to do that, what that delivery mechanism is going to look like, who's going to deliver that message. Are you going to apologize and address it with humor? Are you going to have someone at a high level of the organization respond to it so that people know you're taking it seriously? But all of that starts with not just thumbing out a reply because you see it and it's a problem, right? Not going, oh boy, I got to respond to this right now, right?
And to your point, Eric, a good example of that is Nordstrom. When Donald Trump went on Twitter and attacked them for not carrying his daughter's brand anymore, a bunch of people attacked Nordstrom and said, you're not carrying Ivanka's brand because you hate Republicans or whatever. They had clearly met and they had a consistent message. And for 48 hours, it was phrased differently multiple times. You could tell there were different people, but the message was consistent. You didn't have, like Eric said, 14 different tweets that say 14 different things. So what's the true story? So you have to be really careful with that.
Yeah, that's such a good such a good example. We're just about to open up for Q&A, so if you have any questions, and if you're listening on YouTube, please start adding in your questions. But in terms of comments, lots of times, and I see this more so in the humor aspect, but have you ever noticed times when brands go and comment on another brand and they kind of poke fun or even call them out more? So they kind of jump on the trolling bandwagon?
Hashtag Wendy's.
Yeah. Whataburger is hilarious. The smart brands do it well and make it entertainment.
So then from the user perspective, do you think as long as you can do it in an entertaining fashion and it actually matches your brand tone, it's okay to do something like that?
Yeah, I think like with like the Wendy's example, I mean, they troll Burger King and McDonald's and they troll them back. And it's this whole thing that people have come to expect.
And enjoy, yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing. I'm like, we literally watch them and follow them to see what they're going to be doing, like, because we know it's going to be good. But no, in general, you don't want to be calling out other brands publicly, whether, I mean, even if it's like, you know, something sensitive or political or anything like that, those aren't things you call out. Like there's no reason to call a brand out in those situations. They're going to get enough flack on their own. You can take a stance and say, we as a company feel this way without necessarily mentioning another company, but to go out and troll another company on social media, to attack them publicly, even in jest, is not something I would ever recommend. In the situations like the Wendy's and that sort of thing, they've built a brand on it. It's expected. They actually go back and forth with the Burger Kings, and it becomes this really fun game where it's expected, not only accepted. But in general, no, that's going so low. It's such a bad reflection on you as a brand for you to publicly in any way call out another company like that.
Yeah, big brands get away with more.
Yeah.
Especially like when Jen said they have a reputation for that, and that's what people expect. But otherwise, it just makes you look petty.
Yeah.
Well, and it's got to be a risk. I mean, if you're a business and this is something you've wanted to do, you just haven't been bold enough to do it, and you haven't really been bold enough to stick to your true brand voice on social media because you still feel that it's a risk, because it is a risk. Any advice from any of you guys as we start to wrap up on how to take that step to really embrace your true brand voice on social media and not be so scared?
I think a lot of that comes from live video. I think that's a good place to really start to shine. I mean, when you put people in this kind of context where we're live, you get to see their real personalities, the expertise of those people. And whether your company is a small company, whether it's a medium-sized company, putting people on live video that have a representation of that brand, you may be this super loud mouth, obnoxious brand. Well, when you go live on camera, that's gonna come out. You may be this, really professional and really sleek and really elegant type brand. If you go on live camera, that's going to come out. And that really starts to kind of help shape that voice and that messaging, that when people see that and they realize it's really who the brand is, then it's more acceptable for that commentary to show up in captions of posts and in responses and how you actually formulate your content, because they know it's aligned. They know that that's part of the whole brand. So you don't have to go live, all the time, and you don't have to go live for an hour every time, but just getting out there and having your real life persona out there makes people relate to it, so that when they read it, it's taken more in context. They're less likely to read that sarcasm as being rude or inconsiderate. They're more likely to be like, oh, I know this brand and that's just how they are. And I can hear that in the way I read it.
Yep. Yeah, and I would say in some instances, maybe you shouldn't go live at all. If you're not comfortable on camera and no one in your company is, don't fake it, because people will know. It may be that you are better with written posts. It may be that you are better with visual posts. But the one thing I would say is strive to produce a dimensional message. Don't just promote your stuff. Let people know what your values are. Let them have a glimpse inside what life is like in your business. Let them get to know some of the employees in your business, some of their quirks, some of their habits, some of the things that you all enjoy. Let people know where you go for lunch. Make it a bit more of a dimensional message, and you will automatically stand out from everyone else that is busy promoting themselves.
Yeah, and I would say real quick, because I know we have questions, you can't establish core values for your brand until you know who you are.
Until you know what they are, yeah.
Well, I mean, but you have to know who you are as well. Like there are some companies that won't hire people that have tattoos, and there are companies that hire people that are sleeved and got them on their neck. I mean, you have to know who you are and what you're comfortable with before you can create core values and a brand that you're going to be able to function in and live with for the next 15 to 20 years. And that's okay. It's okay to be unique. It's okay to be yourself. But then there has to be some guidelines for the employees. Like this is how far we go and this is where we don't go.
Yeah.
And once you've got that figured out, the rest, I think, is fairly easy.
Great advice from all of you. Moving into Q&A, we have time for just a couple of questions. The first one, what's the best way to really get more engagement for a small business?
I would say it's kind of goes almost, to kind of what we were just talking about. It's that personalization. It's the more you create reality about your brand. You want to create. So I always tell people, I'm like, go look at your content. Would you interact with it? No? Then stop posting it. What do you like to interact with? Like knowing who you are as a brand and a personality, if you like to interact with certain types of content, video or written post, fun versus educational, figure out what your audience wants and give them more of that. But it has to be something that ties into your brand, what your audience wants, what you like. It has to be entertaining, has to be on point. You can't just turn around and be like, oh, I want more engagement, I'm going to post, more times a day. No, that's not the solution. It comes down to what's going to get engagement. And that's not necessarily the simplest of answers, but it really does come down to knowing your brand and creating content that aligns with that and shows that behind the scenes, shows the entertainment side of it. People don't, I heard this once, like, people don't log on to Facebook in the morning to see what Target has on sale. That's not why they went on Facebook. They went on Facebook to see what their friends and family did over the weekend. So you need to keep that context in mind when you're creating content that they actually want to interact with.
And to further Jen's point, social media is often an escape for people. What do they go for? To be entertained, to smile, to feel good, or maybe to get angry. When I created the Facebook page for Big Cat Habitat, they had no one. And we tried to educate on cats and people like tigers and lions. Nobody liked it. So I just started taking pictures of the cats. And in 2 years, I had 50,000 followers. And all I did was post pictures of tigers and lions and ligers. They didn't like the dogs. They didn't like the monkeys. It didn't matter if they were sleeping, if they were walking. You have to figure out what they like. But posting photos from my own iPhone.
Monkeys are horrible. Let's put that out there, right? Monkeys are terrifying.
Well, but you figure out based on experimentation what your audience
is. By listening. Yep, by listening.
But just remember why people are on social media in the first place and give them what they want.
Yeah, conversation, right? I would say ask questions. If you want engagement, ask your audience a question. Mm-hmm. They're going to answer it and provide some really valuable insights into who your audience is right along with their answers. And so I know we have other questions. I just wanted to add that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so for the last question of the show, Melissa, I'll direct it to you because you talked a lot about team building. This question, they're asking, how many people should be in a social media team?
Depends on what you're going to do. And I mean, you have to figure out which channels you want to be on, what your goals are going to be. Are you going to be creating lots of images? It really comes down to what you want to do and how much time you want to spend on it. I do think it's good if you can to have at least 2 people so you can bounce ideas off of somebody. I don't know the size of the business. I have worked as an individual and only me. For PubCon, it's only me. But I can also go to my team and go, okay, what do you guys think? You have to have someone that you can bounce ideas off of. And you have to have someone when a crisis happens that you can step away and be like, maybe you take this for a minute. I need a break. But there's a lot of factors to consider before I need on a team.
And I was gonna I agree 100% with that. It's so hard to say, but I think you also need to look at what do you expect the commitment of those people to be? Meaning, are you expecting to have 24/7 monitoring of customer service on social media? That's going to mean you need a team of people around the clock that are versed and experienced in those types of questions and comments. If you're, comfortable saying, hey, we'll respond to you within 12 hours, okay, then one person could probably manage that. They're going to have more leeway in the responsiveness. So depending on what your level of expectation is will also dictate the size of that team. I've seen huge organizations manage it with 1 or 2 people, and you've seen smaller companies have a team of 5 or 6. It just depends on that level of commitment, how much work you're actually doing, content creation, monitoring, responding. You could be producing things, producing videos and blog content. All of that takes time, and then you need editors and producers, and so your team could grow easily depending on the type of content and how much of it you want.
Perfect. Yep, that's very helpful. We're going to wrap up now. For those who are listening, I highly recommend you follow all of these amazing individuals on Twitter. They spit out advice like this left and right, and they don't actually post the spooky stuff. They post the good stuff. Thank you for tuning in, and thank you to the amazing panelists for being a part of it. We hope you guys really enjoyed it, and have a great Halloween.
Thanks.